Okay, this is my second attempt to start this over again, where I said, and I quote me, "Oh my God, I can't believe it's Thursday already." So, I think it was in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, where he says, "Tempus fugit," which means time flies. Now, that's where the term, a fugitive comes from. It means he flies over the prison walls into freedom. Yeah, which only lasts for maybe 3 days at the most. Then he drag his ass back to jail. But I've got problems of my own. I'm not going to sit around moaning in sympathy for some guy who should have been in prison in the first place. Yes, I'm talking about Donald Trump. So don't. So first of all, I want to just get, this is a never-ending theme with me. So if you've heard it before, turn it off. Well, wait till you find out what it is. I can't believe everybody turned it off. I have to wait for everybody to sign back on. Still waiting. All right, we'll just go ahead without him. Which means I'm just talking to myself as usual, and my stupid dog who's asleep. Takes after me more and more. So, it's this business of these lawyers, and I get upset because I'm a lawyer. And so I listen to these talking heads, and the other day I was listening to the Dan Abrams show. And many of you probably don't know who he is, but his father was a famous civil rights lawyer. Dan Abrams is a civil rights lawyer himself, and he has a radio show. And so he had somebody on there, an expert, guy who had been practicing civil litigation and federal litigation, state and federal, in New York for some 30 years. And he puts this guy on to ask him questions about the judgment against Donald Trump in New York, the $450 million judgment. And so Dan says to the guy, he says, well, how do they, in terms of, the way they calculated that, did you think that was, did you think that was an award which is way too high for the circumstances? So I knew the answer to that. Why did I know the answer? Because I took the 30 seconds to go on Google, upload the decision, go through the table of contents, find what page the damages analysis began, and I turned to it, and it's about 2 pages, and it's the simplest thing in the world. It's just 3 numbers, and you have to add them together. 1 is the amount of money he saved by getting favorable interest rates. 2 is the profit he made from the sale of the old post office in Washington, D.C., which he had converted into a hotel. And the 3rd was some other real estate. I don't know what it was. But those 3, the difference between, particularly the last 2, what was paid for them, including renovations and everything else, and what it was sold for, was a well-established number in the public domain. Same thing with the last one, this real estate transaction, which I had never heard of it, but so those are 2 that were matters of public domain, and the 3rd was the insurance, and that's a matter of simple calculation, simple math. And then you have to go through this really difficult mathematical procedure consisting of adding 3 numbers together. And this lawyer says, well, I'm not really sure, Dan. I haven't had time to spend a lot of time actually studying this opinion. It's a long opinion. Bullshit. It took me altogether, I timed myself. It took me altogether 7 minutes from beginning to end, including the beginning of the Google search. 7 minutes. This turkey couldn't take 7 minutes to sit down and do a simple addition to find out where the dollar figure was reached. And the reason those were the 3 elements that went into it is that under New York law, this particular statute, if you have violated it by committing fraud on a lending institution, they look to see how much you gained by the fraudulent transaction, and then it adds up to whatever it was, and that is the amount of restitution. They have to take that money away from him so he doesn't keep his ill-gotten gains. And in terms of whether that's a terrible amount for Donald Trump, no, it's not. Because it's the amount of money that he made and or saved by obtaining the loan under false pretenses. So it was money he had, and he got it from that. So they're just taking it away from him. He thinks that whatever he takes is his, and anybody tries to take any of that away from him, well, they're thieves. So, but forget Donald Trump. My issue is with these experts. Why don't they sit down and do a little bit of homework before they get on TV and start opining on things that they don't understand? I don't go into court. I don't have a letter with opposing counsel. unless I have first sat down, thought about what I want to say, go to the books, research it. And these days, you don't have to go to any books. You just go to Google or to go to Westlaw. And the answers are usually right there, especially a simple thing like, what was the basis for the judge's decision? Hello, it's right there in the decision. But I don't do anything in this business unless I first do my research, line up all my ducks, and then when I say something, I speak from a position of authority where I can say, that's based on Jones versus Smith, page 31. And then you can go to Jones versus Smith, page 31, and you can see why I said what I said. And why these lawyers on TV, and many of them are just U.S. attorneys. Now, my dad was the first assistant U.S. attorney, which means he was in charge of the U.S. attorney's office in Indianapolis just after he came back from being in charge of status of forces prosecutions in Europe after World War II. So I kind of know what U.S. attorneys do because my dad was talked to me all the time, hoping I'd make something of myself. I'm sorry, Dad, I tried. What he hoped I would make something of myself was as a pitcher. I was a pitcher in Little League, and Dad had hoped that if I could do that, I wouldn't have to worry about getting into law school, and then he could sit back and be my agent and collect royalties. Well, it didn't work out that way. Guess what? I'm not that great an athlete. I know, but it's true. I don't care if you believe it or not. It's true. I'm not that great an athlete. I look it. All right. You know what? I'm tired of arguing with you people. If you don't want to believe what I say, don't watch the show. But don't be arguing with me while I'm trying to put it on and tell me that you think I'm a great athlete. When modesty compels me. I'm not better than most people, but not good enough to make the big bucks my dad was hoping for. So, but my dad taught me these things all the time I was growing up, and it's like. And I look at these people who are U.S. attorneys. That's where I was going with this. My dad, when he was a U.S. attorney, they were doing criminal law. He wasn't handling civil cases. He was handling criminal cases. And at that time, he didn't hold himself out to be anything other than that. He had been in charge of status of forces, prosecutions in Europe, criminal law. Then he became first assistant U.S. attorney, criminal law. Then he was deputy attorney general for Indiana in charge of criminal cases. So he was a prosecutor. Then in Korea, he represented all the status of forces, not the status force, all of the armed services in the Armed Services Board of Contract Appeals. My dad worked out at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in an old World War I building. And years later, I went to work for the Air Force with the civilian equivalent rank of a major, and I was in the same building. It was even worse shape than it was when my dad was there. But that's when my dad first started doing civil law. And then he, had a full-on career as an Air Force lawyer. And it was contract law basically driven. So that's all civil. But when he was at the U.S. Attorney's office, he wouldn't have walked right out of the U.S. Attorney's office and then gone on TV to opine on civil litigation matters with which he had no experience at that time. But that's what they do all the time. Oh, so-and-so, a former U.S. attorney. Tell us, former U.S. attorney, how did they collect a judgment in New York on a civil dispute? Well, I don't know. Well, that's very complicated. I really haven't had I'm not really sure exactly, but it's going to be a real problem for, Letitia James and it's going to be a problem. It's going to be confusing. It's going to be difficult. It has to entangle. And I'm like, no, it isn't. It isn't that difficult. You get a lien wherever you file your judgment, which in this case automatically in Manhattan, then I think they went to Westchester County. Where you live, it's a lien. And then you foreclose on the lien just as you would if it was a mortgage. This is not complicated stuff, folks. But for crying out loud, if you're going to have somebody on TV to talk about these things, make sure the person has a background in collecting judgments. Is that asking too much? It's not, I don't think. No. That's one sentence. Not I don't think is not a separate sentence. Stop it, Mike. The slings and arrows that I suffer on behalf of my country and my dog and you guys. So on that, I'm going to leave. I'm leaving you. I'm fading away. I'm going away. Goodbye. Goodbye.